5 days after I arrived at my son's lakeside house, I recognized the gardener. He was my former neighbor. He grabbed my hand terrified and said, "Leave this place now, before they come back." I didn't have time to understand what he meant. He looked around and whispered, "There's something you need to see." I went numb when I saw what he showed me. In that very moment I understood everything, and I began planning to make them pay for everything. Thank you for being here with me. Before we continue, tell me, where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country below. This story includes imagined elements to explore deeper ideas about trust, family, and choices. Any resemblance is coincidental, but the message behind it is meant to make you pause, reflect, and perhaps see things differently. 5 hours into the drive somewhere past the Virginia state line, I started to wonder if I'd made a mistake. The invitation had come 2 weeks ago, a phone call from Tyler, my son, his voice warm in a way it hadn't been in years. "Dad," he'd said, "I just bought a place. A real beauty right on the water. You should come stay for a while. We need to spend some time together." I'd hesitated. Tyler and I weren't close. We hadn't been, not since Dorothy passed. Dorothy. Even now, 2 years later, the sound of her name in my head was enough to tighten something in my chest. She'd gone so suddenly, a fall down the stairs in the middle of the night, a single misstep that took her from me before I'd even had the chance to say goodbye. The paramedics said it was instant. That was supposed to be a comfort. It wasn't. Tyler had been distant after that. We'd both been. Grief does strange things to people. But now, out of nowhere, he wanted to reconnect. He wanted me to come stay with him and Lauren, his wife, at their new place in South Carolina. Just for a couple of weeks, he'd said. No pressure, just family. I'd said yes. What else was I going to do? Sit alone in that empty house in Richmond, surrounded by Dorothy's things, listening to the silence. So here I was, windows down, the humid June air pouring in as I crossed into the Carolinas. The landscape changed slowly, rolling green hills, giving way to pine forests and red clay. The radio played something old and familiar. I turned it off. By the time I reached Lake Kiowee, it was nearly 11 in the morning. The GPS led me down a narrow road that wound through the trees, and then suddenly there it was, the house. No, not a house, an estate. The driveway curved up through neatly trimmed hedges, opening onto a sprawling property that had to be 5 acres at least. The main house was modern, all glass and stone, perched on a gentle slope that rolled down to the water. The lake sparkled in the midday sun, wide and blue and impossibly still. I parked near the front steps and climbed out, stretching the stiffness from my legs. The heat hit me immediately, thick and wet, the kind that clings to your skin. Somewhere in the distance, cicadas buzzed in waves. That's when I saw him. A man maybe 20 yards away, kneeling in a flower bed near the corner of the house. He was older, gray hair, weathered hands, wearing a wide-brimmed straw hat that shadowed his face. He was trimming a row of roses, his movements slow and deliberate. I watched him for a moment, wondering if I should say hello. But before I could decide, the front door burst open. "Dad!" Tyler came jogging down the steps. Arms wide, a grin stretched across his face. He looked good, tanned, fit, dressed in a polo shirt and khakis. He pulled me into a hug before I could even set my bag down. "You made it," he said, clapping me on the back. "How was the drive?" "Long," I said, pulling back to look at him. "But not bad." Lauren appeared behind him, descending the steps with practiced grace. She was younger than Tyler by a few years, blonde, always put together in a way that made me feel slightly underdressed. She smiled, bright, perfect, just a little too wide. "Warren," she said, reaching out to take my hand. "It's so good to see you." "Good to see you too, Lauren." Her grip was firm, her palm cool despite the heat. She held on just a beat longer than necessary, her eyes searching mine like she was looking for something. Then she let go and stepped back, still smiling. "Come on," Tyler said, grabbing my bag from the car. "Let me show you around." I glanced back toward the flower bed. The man in the hat had paused, his head turned slightly in our direction, For a second I thought he was looking at me. Then he bent back to his work clipping another stem. "Who's that?" I asked, nodding toward him. Tyler followed my gaze. "Oh, that's Roy. He's the property caretaker, takes care of the grounds, keeps an eye on things when we're not around. Doesn't say much, but he's good at what he does. Roy." I repeated more to myself than to Tyler. "Yeah, nice guy. Comes with the place, basically." Tyler slung my bag over his shoulder and motioned toward the house. "Come on, you've got to see the view from the deck." I followed them in, but something made me glance back one more time. Roy was still there, bent over the roses, his face hidden beneath the brim of his hat. He didn't look up again. The inside of the house was just as impressive as the outside high ceilings, open floor plan windows that framed the lake like a painting. Tyler led me through the main rooms, quickly pointing out features with the enthusiasm of someone showing off a new toy. Lauren trailed behind, adding details here and there about furniture and decor. It was beautiful. Almost too beautiful in a way that felt staged. "Ksto," I said, as we stepped out onto the back deck. "How did you afford all this?" It was a blunt question, maybe, but it was the one that had been nagging at me since I'd pulled into the driveway. Tyler had always done well for himself, but this was another level. He laughed, leaning against the railing. "I had some help. Got a business partner who fronted part of the investment. Tax write-off, you know." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I did know. "Anyway," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Don't worry about that. You're here to relax." Lauren appeared at my elbow with a glass of iced tea. "Here," she said, pressing it into my hand. "You must be exhausted." I took it. The glass was cold, sweating in the heat. "Thank you." She smiled again, that same bright, perfect smile. Of course. We stood there for a while, the three of us looking out over the water. The lake stretched away into the distance, surrounded by low, forested hills. A breeze rippled across the surface, carrying the faint scent of pine and fresh-cut grass. It should have felt peaceful, but it didn't. There was something in the way Tyler kept glancing at Lauren, something in the way she kept watching me out of the corner of her eye, something in the way they were both trying just a little too hard. I told myself I was being paranoid, that grief and loneliness had made me suspicious of kindness, that my son just wanted to spend time with his father, and there was nothing wrong with that. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I didn't know what. Not yet. Later, after Tyler had shown me to my room and left me to unpack, I stood alone on the guest bedroom balcony. The sun was starting to dip lower, casting long shadows across the lawn. The cicadas were louder now, a wall of sound that rose and fell like breathing. Down below near the garden I could see Roy still working. He'd moved to a different flower bed closer to the house. His hat was off now, sitting on the grass beside him. But from this angle I still couldn't see his face. I watched him for a while, wondering who he was, where he'd come from. Then Tyler's voice drifted up from somewhere below, laughing easy, talking to Lauren about something I couldn't quite make out. I turned away from the railing and went back inside. Maybe I was overthinking this. Maybe Tyler really did just want his father around. Maybe this was his way of trying to rebuild what we'd lost when Dorothy passed. Maybe. But as I lay down on the bed that night, staring up at the ceiling in a room that smelled faintly of new paint and lavender, I couldn't stop thinking about the way Lauren's smile never quite reached her eyes, or the way Roy had looked at me just for a second before turning back to his roses. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That unease I felt, the questions that kept me awake that first night, they didn't start when I went to bed. They started earlier at dinner. Tyler had insisted we eat outside on the lower deck at the edge of the water. The sun was sinking low, turning the sky orange and pink, and the cicadas had quieted to a low hum. Lauren brought out grilled chicken and salad along with a pitcher of iced tea. She poured me a tall glass before I'd even sat down. "So here, Warren," she said. "Drink up. It's chamomile and mint, very good for you." "Thank you," I said, taking the glass. The tea was sweet, almost too sweet, with a faint herbal bitterness underneath. Tyler raised his glass in a toast. To family. To family. I echoed and we drank. Tyler talked about the house, about his business, something to do with consulting and investment portfolios. Things have been going really well, he said. We closed a big deal last year and the returns have been, well, let's just say they've been good. Good enough to buy a place like this? I asked. He laughed. Good enough to make a down payment. I had some help partners who saw the value in the property. I nodded. Though something about the way he said it felt rehearsed. Lauren reached across the table and refilled my glass without asking. You haven't touched your tea, she said. You need to stay hydrated. I'm fine, I said, but I took another sip anyway. Tyler leaned back, looking out over the water. It's peaceful here, isn't it? I thought you could use some peace. After everything. He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. It's nice, I said quietly. Thank you for inviting me. Of course, Dad. He glanced at Lauren, then back at me. We want you to stay as long as you like. Really. There was something in the way he said it. Something just slightly off. After a moment, I changed the subject. The grounds are beautiful. Someone's taking good care of them. Oh, that's Roy, Tyler said. The caretaker. He came with the property. Previous owners had him on staff. What's his last name? I asked. Tyler blinked. I'm not sure. The management company handles all that. Everyone just calls him Roy. He seems private, I said. Yeah, he keeps to himself. Does his job stays out of the way? Lauren stood and began clearing plates. More tea, she asked, already reaching for the pitcher. I'm good, I said, covering my glass with my hand. She hesitated just for a second, then smiled and moved on. Later that night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. I kept replaying the evening, Tyler's too bright enthusiasm, Lauren's insistence that I drink the tea, the way they'd exchanged glances when they thought I wasn't looking. Then I heard voices, faint, muffled, coming from somewhere below. I sat up listening. I could just make out Tyler's voice, low and urgent. I got out of bed and moved to the door, easing it open a crack. Shh, stay for a while, Tyler was saying. That's the point. How long? Lauren's voice sharp. As long as it takes. A pause. He's not going anywhere. I stood there in the dark hallway, barely breathing. As long as it takes. What did that mean? Their voices dropped to whispers, and I heard footsteps moving toward the stairs. I slipped back into my room and closed the door as quietly as I could, my heart pounding. Sleep didn't come for a long time. The next morning, I woke to the sound of running water. I dressed and came downstairs, following the noise to the kitchen. Roy was there. He was crouched beneath the sink, a toolbox open beside him, working on the pipes. His back was to me, his shirt damp with sweat. I could see the gray in his hair, the way his shoulders hunched as he reached deeper into the cabinet. Then I saw what he was looking at. On the counter just above where he knelt sat a framed photograph. It was my wedding photo, Dorothy and me, 30 years younger, standing on the steps of the church in Richmond. She was laughing, her head tilted toward mine. Roy had gone completely still. His hand, which had been reaching for a wrench, hovered in midair. He was staring at the photograph, his expression frozen in something that looked like shock. Or recognition. I cleared my throat. He flinched and turned sharply. For the first time, I saw his face clearly weathered, lined with pale blue eyes that were suddenly unmistakably wet. He stood quickly, nearly knocking over the toolbox. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't hear you come in. It's all right, I said, stepping into the kitchen. I didn't mean to startle you. He wiped his hands on his jeans, his gaze darting back to the photograph before snapping back to me. Just fixing the sink, he said, his voice rough. Should be done in a minute. Take your time. He nodded, but he didn't move. He just stood there looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Something deeper than surprise. Something that made my chest tighten. That's my wife, I said, nodding toward the photograph. Was my wife, I mean. She passed a couple years ago. His jaw worked like he was trying to find words. Finally he said, "She was beautiful." "Yes," I said softly. "She was." He looked at me for another long moment, and I had the strangest feeling that he wanted to say something else, that there was something urgent pressing against his teeth, trying to get out. But he didn't. Instead, he bent down, grabbed his toolbox, and straightened. "I should get back to work," he said, his voice tight. "Excuse me." He walked past me quickly, his head down, and disappeared out the back door. I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the photograph of Dorothy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something had just happened. Something important. I just didn't know what. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee drifting up from the kitchen. It was early, just past 7, the sunlight soft and golden through the guest room window. I could hear birds outside, the distant hum of a lawnmower, and something else, Lauren's voice, light and cheerful, calling up the stairs. "Warren, breakfast is ready." I dressed quickly and made my way downstairs. The house smelled warm and inviting, coffee toast, something sweet baking in the oven. Lauren was in the kitchen, moving between the counter and the stove with practiced ease. She turned when she heard me, her smile bright. "Good morning," she said. "I made you something special." On the counter sat a single mug, white ceramic steam curling up from the dark liquid inside. She picked it up and handed it to me, her fingers brushing mine as I took it. "I know you like your coffee strong," she said. "This is a special blend I picked up in town. Fair trade, organic, all that. Tyler doesn't care for it, but I thought you might." "Thank you," I said, bringing the cup to my lips. The smell was rich, almost earthy, with a faint bitterness I couldn't quite place. I took a sip. It was strong, just like she'd said, but there was something else underneath. Something slightly metallic, like the aftertaste of aspirin. "A good?" she asked, watching me. "Very good," I lied. She smiled again and turned back to the stove. Sit. I'll bring you some eggs." I sat at the kitchen table, cradling the mug in my hands. Through the window, I could see Roy outside, kneeling near a row of hedges that ran along the side of the house. He was trimming them with a pair of hand shears, his movements slow and methodical. The window was open, one of those big casement windows that swung out on hinges, and a warm breeze drifted in, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass and roses. Roy glanced up briefly, his eyes flicking toward the kitchen, then back down to his work. I took another sip of coffee. It was easier the second time, the strange taste less noticeable. By the third sip, I'd almost forgotten about it. Lauren set a plate of scrambled eggs in front of me, along with toast and a small bowl of fruit. "Eat up," she said. "You need your strength." "My strength?" I asked, half joking. "Well, you're not getting any younger," she said lightly, though there was something in her tone that made the words feel less like a joke. "We have to take care of you." I nodded and picked up my fork, but my attention kept drifting back to the coffee. I drank more of it almost without thinking until the mug was empty. "Would you like another cup?" Lauren asked. "No, thank you. That was plenty." She took the mug from me, rinsed it in the sink, and set it in the dishwasher. Then she wiped down the counter, her movements quick and efficient, and left the kitchen without another word. I finished my eggs, feeling strangely full, almost sluggish. The warmth in my stomach had spread to my limbs, and my head felt heavy, not painful, just thick, like I'd woken from a deep sleep and hadn't quite shaken it off yet. I stood, intending to take my plate to the sink, and the room tilted, just a little, just enough to make me reach out and steady myself against the table. "Whoa," I muttered, blinking hard. The dizziness passed after a moment, but the heaviness remained. I felt slow, disconnected, like I was moving through water. I made it to the sink, set my plate down, and gripped the edge of the counter. My pulse was steady, my breathing normal. Maybe I'd just stood up too fast, or maybe the coffee had been stronger than I'd thought. "Dad," I turned. Tyler was standing in the doorway, his phone in his hand, pointed at me. "Are you okay?" He asked, his voice casual but his eyes sharp. "I'm fine," I said, though I didn't feel fine. "Just a little lightheaded." You sure? He stepped closer, the phone still raised. You look a little pale. I'm fine, I repeated more firmly this time. He lowered the phone slightly, but he didn't put it away. Do you remember what you had for breakfast? The question threw me. What? Breakfast? He said, his tone patient, like he was talking to a child. Do you remember what you ate? I stared at him. Eggs. Toast. I just ate it 5 minutes ago. And coffee. Yes, and coffee. Why are you asking me this? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. No reason. Just making sure you're okay. He glanced down at his phone, tapped the screen, then slipped it into his pocket. You should sit down. Rest a little. I don't need to rest. I said, though, even as I said it, I felt the weight pulling at me, the strange fog settling over my thoughts. I'm fine. Okay, Dad, whatever you say. He left the kitchen, and I stood there alone, gripping the counter, trying to shake the feeling that something was wrong. But I couldn't. The dizziness came and went in waves, and with it a strange sense of disconnection. I couldn't quite focus. My thoughts felt slippery, like trying to hold water in my hands. I made my way back to the guest room, telling myself I just needed a moment. Just a little rest. I sat on the edge of the bed, then lay back, staring up at the ceiling. The room swayed gently like I was on a boat, and then without meaning to, I closed my eyes. When I woke, the sun had shifted. The light coming through the window was sharper now, higher, midday, maybe later. I sat up slowly, my head still thick, my mouth dry. How long had I been asleep? I checked my watch. It was almost 2 in the afternoon. I'd been out for hours. I stood, testing my balance. The dizziness was gone, but the fog remained, a dull weight pressing down on my skull. I splashed water on my face in the guest bathroom, stared at myself in the mirror. I looked pale, older than I had yesterday. Tired. Downstairs, the house was quiet. I found Tyler and Lauren on the back deck, sitting in the shade with glasses of lemonade. They looked up when I stepped outside, their expressions bright and welcoming. Hey, Dad, Tyler said. You're up. Feeling better. I fell asleep, I said. You needed it, Lauren said. You've been through a lot. Your body's just telling you to slow down. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed her. Here, she said, standing and handing me a glass of lemonade. Drink this. You're probably dehydrated. I took it, but I didn't drink. Not right away. Instead, I sat down in one of the deck chairs and looked out over the lake. The water was calm, glassy, reflecting the sky like a mirror, and somewhere in the back of my mind, a quiet voice whispered, something's wrong, but I didn't know what. Not yet. I woke the next morning with no memory of the night before. Not the evening, not dinner, not climbing the stairs to my room or getting into bed. There was just nothing. A blank space where hours should have been. I sat up slowly, my head thick and heavy, and tried to piece it together. I remembered sitting on the deck in the afternoon drinking lemonade. I remembered the way the sunlight looked on the water, and then nothing. The clock on the nightstand read 8:47 a.m. I'd slept for 14 hours? 15. That wasn't right. I stood, testing my balance. The room swayed slightly, but it steadied after a moment. My mouth was dry, my tongue thick. I felt hungover, though I hadn't touched alcohol in days. Downstairs, I could hear voices, Tyler and Lauren talking in the kitchen. I dressed quickly and made my way down, gripping the railing as I descended the stairs. They looked up when I entered. Tyler was leaning against the counter, a mug of coffee in his hand. Lauren was at the stove scrambling eggs. Morning, Dad. Tyler said, his tone light. How'd you sleep? I hesitated. I slept a long time. You needed it, Lauren said without turning around. You've been exhausted. I nodded, though I wasn't sure that was true. I didn't feel rested. I felt wrong. Tyler set his mug down and stepped closer, his expression concerned. Dad, do you remember last night? I blinked. What about it? We had dinner together. On the deck. You told us about the time you and Mom went camping in the Shenandoah. You don't remember. I stared at him. I had no memory of that. No memory of dinner or the deck or telling any stories. My voice trailed off. Tyler pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. Then he turned it toward me. On the screen was a video me sitting at the table on the deck holding a glass of wine I didn't remember drinking. I was talking, my words slightly slurred, gesturing with my hands. I looked tired, unfocused. I didn't remember any of it. You were pretty out of it, Tyler said gently. We thought maybe you'd had too much wine, but you only had one glass. You kept saying you were fine, and then you just went to bed. I felt cold. I don't remember that. None of it. No. He exchanged a glance with Lauren. It was quick, barely a flicker, but I caught it. Maybe you should sit down, Lauren said, bringing me a plate of eggs and toast. Here, eat something. I sat, but I didn't touch the food. My stomach felt tight, knotted. And Dad and Tyler said, his voice careful. Have you been forgetting things lately? I mean, before you got here. No, I said. I don't forget things. It's just... He hesitated. You're at that age, you know it's normal for memory to slip a little. That age. I looked at him, and something cold settled in my chest. I'm 63, I said, not 90. I know. He held up his hands. I'm not saying it's a big deal. I'm just saying, maybe we should keep an eye on it. That's all. Lauren set a mug of coffee in front of me. Here, she said. This'll help you wake up. I looked down at the mug. The coffee was dark, steaming the same rich smell as yesterday. My hand moved toward it almost automatically, but then I stopped. What's in this? I asked. Lauren blinked. What? The coffee. What kind is it? It's just coffee, Warren. The same blend I gave you yesterday. You said you liked it. I didn't remember saying that. But I picked up the mug and took a sip anyway. Because what else was I going to do? Accuse her of something I couldn't even name. The taste was the same strong bitter with that faint metallic aftertaste. I drank half the cup, then set it down and forced myself to eat a few bites of toast. Tyler sat across from me watching. You sure you're okay? I'm fine, I said, though I wasn't. My head felt stuffed with cotton, my thoughts slow and sticky. Oh, good. He stood, slipping his phone into his pocket. Well, Lauren and I have some errands to run in town. We'll be back this afternoon. You just take it easy, okay? I nodded. They left a few minutes later, and the house fell quiet. I sat at the table, staring at the half-empty mug of coffee, trying to understand what was happening to me. I didn't forget things. I never had. I could remember conversations from 20 years ago, the names of my co-workers' children, the exact date Dorothy and I bought our first house. My memory had always been sharp. But now, I couldn't remember last night. I couldn't remember telling Tyler and Lauren about camping in the Shenandoah. I couldn't remember drinking wine or going to bed, and the more I tried to remember, the more the blankness seemed to expand, swallowing details I thought I'd had just moments ago. What had I done yesterday afternoon, after I woke from that long, strange nap? I couldn't remember. Had I eaten dinner? I couldn't remember. Panic started to creep in, cold and insidious. I stood pacing the kitchen, trying to shake the fog from my head, but it clung to me thick and suffocating. Through the window, I saw Roy working in the garden. He was on his knees near the roses again, his back to the house. For a moment I thought about going out there, asking him if he'd seen me last night. If I'd seemed normal. But I didn't. Instead, I went back upstairs, climbed into bed, and closed my eyes. Just for a minute, I told myself. Just to rest. When I woke again, the light had changed. The sun was lower, softer. I checked my watch. 4:13 p.m. I'd been asleep for hours. Again. I sat up, my heart pounding. This wasn't normal. This wasn't exhaustion or jet lag or grief. This was something else. Something was wrong with me. I stood and went to the window. Down below, Tyler and Lauren were back sitting on the deck with glasses of iced tea. They were laughing about something, their heads close together. And beyond them, near the edge of the property, I saw Roy. He was standing by his truck, a beat-up old pickup parked near the garden shed. He was on his phone, his back turned, gesturing as he spoke. Who was he talking to? I watched him for a long moment, but he didn't look up. He just kept talking, his shoulders tense, his movements sharp. Then he hung up, climbed into the truck, and drove away. I stood there at the window, my reflection faint in the glass, and felt the weight of the silence pressing down on me. I was alone in this house, and I was forgetting. The morning of June 8th arrived with a pale gold light slipping through the blinds. I woke to the sound of car doors slamming, and Tyler's voice drifting up from the driveway, something about a lawyer's office in Greenville. A moment later, the engine rumbled and faded down the gravel lane. The house fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioner and the distant cry of a hawk over the lake. I lay still, my head heavy, as if someone had packed it with wet sand. The previous day remained a blur. Coffee in the kitchen, Tyler's worried face, the video of me holding a wine glass I couldn't remember touching. I pressed my palms against my temples, trying to will the fog away, but it clung like cobwebs. A knock came at the bedroom door, soft but urgent, 3 quick raps. A man's voice low and careful. I need to speak with you. It's urgent. I sat up slowly, my heart beginning to thud. Who's there? Roy, the gardener. Please, sir, we don't have much time. I shuffled to the door and opened it. The man standing in the hallway was tall, perhaps 70, with silver hair combed back and deep lines around his eyes. He wore khaki work pants and a faded denim shirt. In his hand, he clutched a wide-brimmed straw hat, the same hat I'd seen on the figure pruning roses 4 days ago. Without the hat shading his face, I could see him clearly. Something stirred in my memory, a flash of a brick colonial in Richmond, a neighbor waving from his porch, a little girl on a tricycle. Roy, I repeated slowly. Roy Weber. His shoulders sagged in relief. Yes, you remember. Richmond, I said, my voice unsteady. You lived 3 houses down. We were neighbors, 20 years ago? 2003 to 2008. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him, glancing toward the hallway as if expecting someone. I didn't know you'd be here. Your son hired me through a service company last year. I didn't realize this was his house until I saw you arrive. But why didn't you say anything? Because I wasn't sure what was happening, and now I am. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. This is a toxicology report. I had a sample of your coffee tested by an FBI lab in Atlanta. A former colleague of mine ran it as a favor. I stared at the paper, my hands trembling as I unfolded it. The letterhead read, Federal Bureau of Investigation Laboratory Division. Below it, a list of chemical compounds, most of which meant nothing to me. But one line was circled in red ink. Zolpidem tartrate 15 milligrams per 100 milliliters. Reference safe dose 5 milligrams per 100 milliliters. Assessment intentional overdose likely. Consistent with memory impairment strategy. Zolpidem, I whispered. That's a sleeping pill. Ambien, yes. At this concentration, it doesn't just make you drowsy, it erases short-term memory, causes confusion, makes you appear disoriented. Someone has been slipping it into your drinks for days. Roy's voice was steady, but his eyes were hard. Your son and his wife are poisoning you, Warren. They're trying to make you look like you've lost your mind so they can take control of your assets. The room seemed to tilt. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the paper crumpling in my fist. Tyler wouldn't. He's my son. He would. And he is. Roy sat beside me, his voice gentler now. 2 days ago, I watched your daughter-in-law pour a white powder into your coffee while you were in the bathroom. I took a sample from your cup after you drank it. That's what I sent to the lab. Yesterday morning, I drove to Atlanta and brought it back. My colleague called me at 7 this morning with the results. I couldn't breathe. The memory gaps, the strange videos, Tyler's too careful questions about the house in Virginia. It all clicked into place. Like pieces of a puzzle I'd been too blind to see. Why? I managed. Why would they do this? Money. Your son is deeply in debt over $600,000, according to the documents I found in his office. Your daughter-in-law owes nearly $200,000. They bought this house hoping to flip it, but the market turned. Now they're desperate. Roy paused. If they can prove you're mentally incompetent, they can petition a court for guardianship. Once they control your finances, they'll drain everything you have. How do you know all this? Because I spent 30 years with the FBI. I know how to find things. He met my gaze. And because I owe you. Owe me? Your wife, Dorothy. His voice softened. Back in Richmond in 2007, my daughter, she was 8, fell into the creek behind your house. Dorothy pulled her out. She saved my little girl's life. He looked down at his hands. When I heard Dorothy had passed 2 years ago, I wanted to reach out. But I didn't. I thought you and your son were fine. I was wrong. A lump rose in my throat. Dorothy had never told me she'd saved a child. She'd downplayed so many of her kindnesses, always brushing them off with a laugh. And now, 2 years after her death, her compassion was saving me. Nort, I said quietly, what do I do? He straightened. You have 2 choices. 1, you leave this house immediately. I'll drive you to the sheriff's office in Seneca. We'll file a report, and you'll stay somewhere safe until the investigation is done. But they'll lawyer up, destroy evidence, and it'll be your word against theirs. Without more proof, you might lose. And the second choice, you stay. You pretend the medication is still working. You act confused, forgetful, weak, exactly what they want to see. Meanwhile, I'll gather evidence recordings, photographs, financial documents. We'll build a case so airtight they won't be able to talk their way out. And then we'll bring in law enforcement. That's dangerous. So very. You'll be living under the same roof as 2 people who are actively trying to harm you. But if you can hold on, we'll catch them red-handed. I looked at the toxicology report in my hand, then at the man who had once been my neighbor, a man I'd barely known, but who now stood between me and my own son's treachery. How long, Hundo? I asked. A week, maybe 2. I'll swap out your coffee every morning before they wake. You'll drink a clean cup and pretend to drink theirs. I'll install a hidden camera in the kitchen, FBI grade 5mm invisible. We'll record every move they make. I thought of Tyler's smile at dinner. Lauren's 2 bright eyes, the video of me stumbling on the deck. Rage and heartbreak collided in my chest, but beneath them both was something colder resolve. I'll do it, I said. Roy nodded slowly. Then we start now. When they come back this afternoon, you need to be exactly what they expect. Slow, forgetful, compliant. Can you do that? I spent 40 years as an engineer, I replied. I can follow a blueprint. He almost smiled. Good. Because this is the most important performance of your life. As he stood to leave, I caught his arm. Roy, thank you. For Dorothy. For me. She saved my daughter, he said simply. Now I'm saving her husband. It's what she would have wanted. After he left, I sat alone in the morning light, the toxicology report on my lap. Somewhere down the road, Tyler and Lauren were driving back from Greenville, confident that their plan was working. They had no idea that the confused old man they'd been poisoning had just become something far more dangerous, an actor with a script, a witness with proof, and a father with nothing left to lose. I was 63 years old, and I was about to play the role of a man losing his mind in his own son's house, to trap the most dangerous enemy I'd ever faced. The afternoon of June 8th brought a suffocating heat that pressed against the windows like a hand. I stood in the upstairs hallway listening to the crunch of tires on gravel as Tyler's SUV pulled into the driveway. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the first performance of a role I'd never auditioned for. Roy had found me an hour earlier in the guest room, his voice low and urgent. "They'll be back by 3. When Lauren brings you coffee, drink it. I've already switched the pot in the kitchen. What she'll pour is clean. But you need to act like it's working. Confusion, dizziness, memory gaps. Can you do that?" I'd nodded, though my hands were shaking. Now I heard the front door open, followed by Lauren's bright voice calling up the stairs. "Dad, we're home." I took a breath and walked slowly down the steps, gripping the banister, as if my balance were uncertain. Tyler stood in the foyer, his suit jacket slung over one arm, his expression carefully neutral. Lauren was already in the kitchen, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. "Hey, Dad." Tyler's smile didn't reach his eyes. "How was your afternoon?" "Well," I said, letting my words come a beat too slow. I think I took a nap. I'm not sure." That's good. You need rest." He exchanged a glance with Lauren, quick, almost imperceptible, but I caught it. Lauren appeared in the doorway holding a white mug. Steam curled from the rim. "Dad, I made you some coffee. It's that blend you liked yesterday." I took the mug with both hands as if steadying myself. The coffee smelled normal, no metallic edge, no bitterness beneath the roasted aroma. Roy had kept his word. I sipped it slowly, letting the warmth spread through my chest, and then I let my eyelids droop. "Oh." I set the mug down on the side table and pressed my palm to my forehead. My head, it's spinning again. "Dad," Tyler moved closer, his phone already in his hand. I saw the red light of the camera blinking. "Are you okay?" I don't know." I blinked at him, forcing my gaze to wander, as if I couldn't quite focus. "Where were you today?" "Greenville, remember we told you this morning." His tone was patient, almost tender, but his thumb was steady on the record button. "Greenville," I repeated, shaking my head slowly. I don't remember." Lauren stepped forward, her voice honeyed with concern. "You were still in bed when we left, Dad. Maybe you were too tired to hear us. Maybe." I let my shoulders sag. "I'm sorry. My memory, it's getting worse." "It's all right." Tyler lowered his phone but didn't stop recording. "Listen, Dad, tomorrow we're meeting with a lawyer. Just some paperwork to make sure your finances are protected. You remember we talked about that, right?" I stared at him, my face blank. "A lawyer? What lawyer?" Tyler's eyes flicked to Lauren. She gave a small, triumphant nod. "Don't worry about it," he said smoothly. "We'll remind you in the morning." I nodded vaguely and picked up the coffee again, taking another sip. My hand trembled, not entirely an act. Tyler watched me for a moment longer, then slipped his phone into his pocket. "Why don't you rest a bit more, Dad? We'll call you when dinner's ready." I shuffled toward the stairs, moving like a man twice my age. Behind me I heard their voices drop to murmurs. I paused on the landing just out of sight and strained to listen. "He's worse than yesterday," Lauren said, her tone bright with satisfaction. "I 2, maybe 3 more days," Tyler replied. "Then we file the petition. With the videos, the judge will approve it. We'll control everything, the house, the accounts, all of it." Their laughter drifted up the stairs, soft and cold. I gripped the railing, my knuckles white, and forced myself to keep moving. I climbed the rest of the stairs and closed the door to the guest room. Only then did I let my shoulders shake. The night fell thick and moonless. I lay on the bed, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling, waiting. At 11 o'clock, a soft knock came at my door. "It's me," Roy whispered. I opened the door. He was dressed in dark jeans and a black t-shirt, a small duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "They're asleep," he said quietly. "Now's the time." We moved through the house like shadows. Roy led me downstairs to the living room, where a large round clock hung on the wall above the fireplace, one of those decorative pieces with Roman numerals and a brass rim. He set his bag on the coffee table and unzipped it, revealing a collection of tiny devices no larger than shirt buttons. "FBI-grade equipment," he murmured, pulling out a camera the size of a pencil eraser. 5 mm. I'm installing it inside the clock. It'll record everything to a secure server. They'll never know it's there. I watched as he carefully removed the clock from the wall and opened the back casing. Within minutes, he'd fitted the tiny lens into a gap in the mechanism, angling it to cover the room. He replaced the casing, hung the clock back, and checked the feed on his tablet. A clear image of the living room filled the screen. "Perfect," he said. "From now on, every word they say in here will be recorded. What if they find it? They won't. And even if they did by then, we'll have everything we need." He packed up his tools, and we crept back upstairs. At my door, he paused. "You did well today," he said. "Your performance was convincing." "It didn't feel like acting," I admitted. "It felt like I was disappearing." "You're not disappearing. You're fighting." His voice was firm. "Remember that." After he left, I lay back down, but sleep wouldn't come. I could still hear Tyler's voice in my mind. 2, maybe 3 more days. I thought about the clock downstairs, its hidden eye watching and waiting. I thought about the coffee I'd drunk clean, harmless, but serving as my disguise. I thought about the look on Lauren's face when I'd asked about the lawyer, that flash of victory in her eyes. I was 63 years old, and I was living like an undercover operative in my own son's house. Every word I spoke was a lie. Every gesture was calculated. Every moment I pretended to be less than I was. They believed they were winning. But what terrified me most wasn't the charade itself. It was how easily they'd embraced my supposed decline. Tyler hadn't hesitated to record me, hadn't flinched when I'd claimed not to remember. Lauren had smiled, as if watching a plan unfold exactly as designed. Somewhere down the hall, Tyler and Lauren slept soundly, confident that their scheme was working. They had no idea that the confused man they'd been manipulating was fully aware, fully awake, and gathering evidence with every passing hour. Tomorrow they'd bring me more coffee. Tomorrow I'd stumble through another performance. Tomorrow they'd record me again, building their case. But tomorrow, that hidden camera would be watching them too. I closed my eyes and tried to slow my breathing. Roy's words echoed in my mind. "You're not disappearing. You're fighting." He was right. I wasn't the victim they believed me to be. I was something far more dangerous, a father who knew the truth, a man with nothing left to lose, and a witness with a camera trained on the very people trying to harm him. As I drifted toward an uneasy sleep, one question haunted me. What will they do next, now that they think I'm completely helpless? The morning of June 9th arrived with a soft gray light and the smell of rain in the air. I sat at the kitchen table, pretending to stare vacantly at a bowl of oatmeal Lauren had set in front of me, while Tyler stood by the counter scrolling through his phone. "Dad," Tyler said without looking up, "Lauren and I are heading to Greenville this morning. We need to meet with a lawyer about Grandma's estate, some paperwork that needs signing." I blinked slowly, as if processing his words took effort. "Your grandmother, Mom's estate." He clarified his tone, patient but clipped. "We'll be back this afternoon. You just stay here and rest, okay?" I nodded, my gaze drifting back to the oatmeal. Lauren appeared in the doorway, car keys jingling in her hand. "We'll be gone a few hours, Dad. There's lunch in the fridge if you get hungry." "Okay," I murmured. They left without another word. I listened to the SUV's engine fade down the driveway, my heart beginning to race. The moment the sound disappeared, Roy appeared in the doorway, his expression sharp and focused. "They're gone," he said quietly. "This is our chance." Tyler's office, I need to see what's in there. I stood, my hands trembling. You can get in. I spent 30 years with the FBI. Locks are the least of my problems. He pulled a small leather case from his pocket filled with thin metal tools. But I need you with me. You should see this yourself. We moved down the hallway to Tyler's office, a room I'd only glimpsed once its door always kept closed. Roy knelt by the lock, his fingers working with practiced precision. Within seconds, I heard a soft click. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The office was neat, almost sterile. A polished oak desk, a filing cabinet against one wall, a laptop sitting closed on the desktop. Roy went straight to the filing cabinet and opened the top drawer. His hands moved quickly, flipping through folders until he pulled out a thick manila file. "It was here," he said, laying it on the desk. "Look at this." I stepped closer, my pulse hammering in my ears. Roy opened the file, revealing a stack of documents neatly clipped together. The top page was a legal form dense with text and official stamps. My eyes caught the heading, "Petition for Declaration of Incapacity. Re Warren James Donovan, age 63. The words blurred for a moment. I had to read them again. "They're asking a court to declare you mentally incompetent," Roy said, his voice low. "If a judge signs this, they'll be appointed your legal guardians. They'll control your bank accounts, your property, everything." I flipped to the next page. It was a printed list of evidence, dates, times, descriptions of incidents. June 5th, subject unable to recall previous evening's events. June 6th, subject disoriented, asked same question multiple times. June 7th, subject confused about location and date. "They've been documenting everything," I whispered. "Not just documenting, fabricating." Roy pointed to the next section, a series of still images printed on glossy paper. I recognized myself in each one, sitting on the deck, holding a wine glass, standing in the kitchen, looking lost, staring blankly at the television. In every photo, I looked older, frailer, confused. "They've been recording you," Roy said. "Every moment they thought you were impaired. These will be submitted as visual evidence." My hands shook as I turned to the next document. It was a letter on medical letterhead. Marcus Hayes, M.D. Neurology and Geriatric Medicine, Greenville, South Carolina. The letter was dated June 7th, 2 days ago. It stated that I had been evaluated and diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's disease with progressive memory impairment and diminished executive function. It recommended immediate intervention and the appointment of a legal guardian. "I've never seen this doctor in my life," I said, my voice barely audible. "You haven't, because he didn't write this." Roy tapped the letterhead. "This is a forgery. Tyler probably paid someone to draft it, or he fabricated it himself. Either way, it's fake. But in court, it'll look real enough to convince a judge." I felt the room tilt. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. Roy pulled out another document, a contract. At the top in bold letters, "Retainer Agreement, Richard Morrison, Esquire. $25,000. Roy read aloud. "Your son hired a lawyer to file this petition. He's paying him $25,000 to take away your rights." Why? The word came out as a rasp. "Why would he do this?" Roy flipped to another section of the file bank statements. Printed emails, text message, screenshots. He spread them across the desk. The top statement showed Tyler's account balance minus $587,432.18. He's drowning in debt," Roy said. "Credit cards, personal loans, business ventures that went under. He owes over $600,000. And look at this." He handed me a screenshot of a text conversation between Tyler and Lauren. "Lauren, how much longer the creditors are pushing? Tyler, 2 more days. Once we file the petition, we'll have access to everything. His house in Virginia alone is worth close to $1 million. Lauren, what if he fights it? Tyler, he won't. He won't even remember what's happening." I read the messages twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. "They're not just trying to control your money," Roy said quietly. "They're planning to take everything you have, your home, your savings, your freedom, and they're using the legal system to do it." I looked up at him. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. "This isn't just about the medication they've been giving me. No! The medication was step 1, make you appear confused and incapable. Step 2 is this." He gestured to the documents. "A legal trap. If they succeed, you'll be declared incompetent. They'll be your guardians. You'll have no legal standing to fight them. Everything you own will be theirs to manage and to drain." "How long have they been planning this?" I don't know. But based on these documents, at least a few weeks, maybe longer." He pulled out his phone and began photographing each page, each image, each text message. "We're taking all of this, every piece of evidence. When the time comes, we'll bury them with it." I stared at the desk, at the carefully organized files, the cold precision of the plan laid out before me. This wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't a desperate act. This was calculated, methodical, deliberate. My son had been preparing to erase me. Roy finished photographing the documents and carefully reassembled the file, placing it back in the cabinet exactly as he'd found it. He closed the drawer, locked the office door behind us, and led me back to the kitchen. I sank into a chair, my legs weak. Roy sat across from me, his expression grim but resolute. "We have everything we need now," he said. "The medication results, the fake medical letter, the petition, the financial motive. When we're ready, we'll take this to the authorities. Tyler and Lauren won't know what hit them." I nodded, but I couldn't speak. My mind was spinning, replaying the text messages, the false doctor's letter, the petition with my name on it. This wasn't just about money. It was about control. It was about turning me into a ghost in my own life, a man with no voice, no power, no future, and they'd almost succeeded. I looked at Roy, my voice hoarse. "How long have they been planning this? Was it before Dorothy?" I couldn't finish the sentence. But the question hung in the air between us, heavy and terrible. Roy's expression darkened. "I don't know, but we're going to find out." The afternoon light was fading to a bruised purple when Roy found me sitting on the back porch, staring at the lake. My mind was still spinning from the documents we'd found in Tyler's office, the petition, the fake medical letter, the text messages that laid out their plan in cold, precise language. Roy sat down beside me, his expression grim. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he pointed toward the far end of the property, where a low wooden structure sat near the water's edge. "The boathouse," he said quietly. "I've been watching it for the past few days. It has an industrial-grade padlock, heavy duty, the kind you'd use for a storage facility or a warehouse. That's unusual for a place that's supposed to hold a couple of kayaks and fishing gear." I looked at the building. From this distance, it seemed ordinary enough: weathered wood, a shingled roof, a single door facing the lake. "You think there's something in there?" I asked. "I think your son doesn't want anyone getting inside." Roy stood. "And that makes me very interested in what he's hiding." We walked down the sloping lawn toward the boathouse, the grass still damp from the morning rain. The air smelled of pine and wet earth. As we got closer, I could see the padlock Roy had mentioned, a thick steel lock with a reinforced shackle far more robust than anything you'd need for a simple shed. Roy pulled out his leather case of tools again. "This one's trickier," he murmured, kneeling by the door. "But not impossible." I stood behind him, my heart pounding. The sun was sinking lower, casting long shadows across the water. Somewhere in the house, Tyler and Lauren were probably unpacking from their trip to Greenville, unaware that we were out here. After a few tense minutes, I heard a metallic click. Roy pulled the padlock free and pushed the door open. The inside of the boathouse was dim, lit only by the fading daylight filtering through gaps in the wood. But even in the shadows, I could see what filled the space: stacks of cardboard boxes, dozens of them, piled nearly to the ceiling. Each box was marked with a printed label, medical supplies. Roy stepped inside and pulled a small flashlight from his pocket, sweeping the beam across the room. He moved to the nearest stack and used a pocket knife to slice open the tape on one of the boxes. I moved closer, peering over his shoulder. Inside the box were rows of plastic bottles, the kind you'd see in a pharmacy. Roy lifted one out and held it up to the light. The label read, oxycodone 30 milligrams, but there was no pharmacy name, no prescription number, nothing official. Just a generic label and a bottle full of blue pills. Roy opened another box. More bottles. Hydrocodone fentanyl patches, morphine sulfate. Thousands of pills neatly packed and labeled. I couldn't finish the sentence. My throat had gone dry. Opioids? Roy said flatly. Controlled substances? Black market pharmaceuticals? Street value for a haul like this? He looked around at the stacks of boxes. $12 million, maybe more. I felt the room tilt. I reached out to steady myself against the doorframe. Tyler. Tyler is involved in this. More than involved. He's running it. Roy set the bottle back in the box and turned to face me. Do you remember the previous owner of this house, James Whitmore? Tyler mentioned him once. Said he died last year. December 2024. Roy confirmed. Whitmore was a smuggler, moved illegal medication up from the southern border, distributed it through a network in the Carolinas. The FBI had been watching him for years, but he was careful. We never got enough evidence to move on him. Then he had a heart attack and died before we could build a case. And Tyler bought this house from his estate, I said slowly, the pieces falling into place. Exactly. I think Tyler found this stash after he moved in. Maybe Whitmore's people couldn't retrieve it in time, or maybe they didn't know it was here. Either way, Tyler saw an opportunity. He's $600,000 in debt. He's desperate. So instead of reporting it, he decided to take over the operation. I stared at the boxes, my mind reeling. But why keep it here? Why not move it somewhere else? Because he's planning to frame you. Roy's voice was hard. Think about it. If law enforcement gets tipped off and raids this place, who's the owner of record on the deed? You. You're the father. And if Tyler succeeds in getting you declared mentally incompetent, he can claim you didn't know what was happening, that someone was using your property without your knowledge. He'll play the concerned son trying to protect his confused father. Meanwhile, you'll be the one facing charges. The words hit me like a physical blow. He wants to turn me into a criminal. He wants to use you as a shield. If things go south, you take the fall. And because you've been declared incompetent, your testimony won't hold weight. You'll be seen as an unreliable witness, a sick old man who doesn't understand what's happening around him. I sank down onto an overturned crate, my legs too weak to hold me. My son, my own son, had poisoned me, plotted to steal my assets, and now planned to pin a federal offense on me if his scheme collapsed. We need to document this, Roy said, pulling out his phone. He began photographing the boxes, the labels, the bottles inside. The flash lit up the dim space in quick, bright bursts. I watched him work, numb. I couldn't speak. I couldn't think. All I could see were those rows and rows of bottles, each one a piece of evidence that my son had become someone I no longer recognized. Roy was halfway through photographing the third stack when we both heard it, the distant sound of tires on gravel. "Oh, they're back," Roy said sharply. He shoved his phone into his pocket, quickly closed the box he'd opened, and grabbed my arm. "We need to go. Now." We slipped out of the boathouse. Roy locked the padlock again, his hands moving fast but steady. Then we hurried back across the lawn toward the house, trying to look casual, trying not to run. We reached the back porch just as I heard the front door open. Tyler's voice carried through the house. "Dad, you here?" Roy gave me a quick nod, and disappeared around the side of the house, heading toward his cabin. I took a breath, steadied myself, and walked inside. Tyler was standing in the living room, his suit jacket draped over one arm. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Hey, Dad, where were you?" I forced my expression into something vague and confused. I was just walking around. Outside. I think I wanted to see the water. By yourself. Yes, I think so. I let my voice trail off as if I weren't entirely sure. Tyler studied me for a long moment. I could feel his gaze weighing me, measuring me, searching for cracks in the performance. "You shouldn't wander off like that," he said finally. "You could get lost. Or hurt." "I'm sorry," I murmured. "I forgot." He nodded slowly, but the suspicion didn't leave his eyes. "Next time, stay inside." Okay. He turned and walked toward the kitchen, leaving me standing alone in the living room. I heard him open the refrigerator, heard the clink of a bottle being set on the counter. Normal sounds, everyday sounds, but nothing about this was normal. I sank into the armchair by the window, my hands trembling. My son wasn't just someone who had poisoned me. He wasn't just someone who wanted to take my money. He was a trafficker, a criminal operating on a scale I could barely comprehend. And I, an old man he was trying to render powerless, was the perfect scapegoat. If his plan worked, I wouldn't just lose my freedom or my assets. I'd lose everything. My name, my reputation, my life. And he'd walk away untouched. If you're still here with me, comment 8 so I know you're still following this story. And tell me, if you were in my place, would you stay silent and observe, or confront them right now, risking everything? Because what comes next changes everything. And just a quick note. The next part includes some dramatized elements for storytelling purposes if you'd rather not continue. This is your moment to step away. The house fell silent just after 11. I sat in the guest room with the lights off, listening to the sounds of the night, the creak of the floorboards above me as Tyler moved around upstairs, the faint hum of the air conditioning, the distant call of an owl somewhere over the lake. Eventually, I heard Tyler's bedroom door close, then Lauren's softer footsteps, then nothing. I waited another 20 minutes, my heart beating slow and heavy in my chest, until I was certain they were asleep. A soft knock came at my door. Roy slipped inside, his face pale in the moonlight filtering through the window. "They're out," he whispered. "I need to show you something. Dorothy used to keep a journal. I remember her mentioning it once years ago. If she left it behind, there might be something in it. Something that explains what happened." "Yeah, where would it be?" "The attic. It's the only place Tyler wouldn't have looked." "Come on." We moved through the dark hallway like shadows, our footsteps muffled by the carpet. Roy led me to a narrow door at the end of the hall, one I'd passed several times but never opened. He pulled a string hanging from the ceiling, and a folding ladder dropped down. "Wait here," he whispered. "If you hear anything, warn me." But I shook my head. "I'm coming with you." Roy didn't argue. We climbed the ladder into the attic, a low, musty space filled with cardboard boxes, old furniture, and the smell of dust and aged wood. Roy pulled out his flashlight and swept the beam across the cluttered room. "She would have hidden it," he murmured, moving toward a stack of boxes in the corner. "Somewhere Tyler wouldn't think to look." I stood near the ladder, watching the shadows, listening for any sound from below. My hands were shaking. Roy knelt beside an old wooden chest, its surface worn and scratched. He lifted the lid carefully, and I saw him pause. "Warren," he said quietly. "Come here." I crossed the attic and looked down into the chest. Inside, wrapped in a faded blue cloth, was a leather-bound journal. The cover was dark brown, soft with age, and embossed in faint gold letters on the front. Dorothy Donovan, 2022 to 2023. Roy lifted it out and opened it carefully. The pages were filled with Dorothy's handwriting, small, neat, familiar. I recognized it immediately. I'd seen that handwriting on birthday cards, grocery lists, notes left on the kitchen counter. Roy flipped to the end of the journal where the entries stopped abruptly. He angled the flashlight so I could read. January 15th, 2023. Tyler came by today asking for money. He wants $50,000 to invest in a business opportunity. I told him no. Warren and I worked too hard for our savings to hand it over on a whim. Tyler didn't take it well. He raised his voice, something he's never done before. When he left, he slammed the door so hard the picture frames rattled. I've never seen him that angry. I felt my throat tighten. I remembered that day. Dorothy had mentioned Tyler's visit, but she'd downplayed it. She'd said he was stressed about work. She hadn't told me he'd shouted at her. Roy turned the page. January 28th, 2023. Tyler came back. This time he didn't ask for money. He asked about the will. He wanted to know how much Warren and I were worth, what assets we had, who would inherit if something happened to us. I told him it wasn't his concern. He said, "When Dad's gone, everything will be mine anyway." The way he said it made my skin crawl. His eyes were cold. I've never seen that look before. I don't know my own son anymore. My hands were trembling. Roy glanced at me, his expression grim, and turned another page. February 10th, 2023. Warren is traveling for work this week. Tyler showed up unannounced yesterday evening. He let himself in with the spare key we gave him years ago. He stayed for 2 hours, asking questions about our finances, our property, our retirement accounts. I tried to deflect, but he kept pressing. When he finally left, I locked all the doors and checked them twice. I don't feel safe. I don't know what he's planning, but I'm afraid. I could barely breathe. I remembered that business trip I'd been in Charlotte for 3 days. Dorothy had called me once, said everything was fine. She'd never mentioned Tyler's visit. Roy turned to the last page. The handwriting here was shakier, the letters uneven, as if Dorothy's hand had been trembling. March 3rd, 2023. I think Tyler has been putting something in my tea. For the past week, I've been dizzy, disoriented, forgetting things. This morning, I almost fell down the stairs. My balance is gone. I can't think straight. Warren, if you're reading this, please know I love you. Please know I tried to tell you, but I didn't want to believe it myself. If something happens to me, please investigate Tyler. Please don't let him get away with this. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The entry ended there. The rest of the pages were blank. I stared at the words until they blurred. My chest felt like it was caving in. Warren. Roy's voice was soft, careful. She knew. She knew what he was doing. She tried to warn me. My voice cracked. And I didn't see it. I couldn't finish. The tears came suddenly hot and unstoppable. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound, but my shoulders shook. Roy closed the journal gently and placed it in my hands. She wrote this so you would know. She wanted you to find it. I looked down at the cover at Dorothy's name embossed in fading gold. My wife. The woman who had saved Roy's daughter. The woman who had loved me for 40 years. She had spent her last days afraid, alone, trying to leave behind a warning I'd never received. Tyler did this, I whispered. He put something in her tea. He made her dizzy. She fell down the stairs. And I couldn't say the word, but Roy said it for me. He was responsible for her death. Roy said, his voice hard. And now he's doing the same thing to you. I nodded, unable to speak. The weight of it was crushing. Dorothy's fear, her isolation, her final apology. She'd known. She'd tried. And I'd been too blind, too trusting, too convinced that my son could never. Roy. I looked up at him, my vision still blurred. I didn't protect her. You didn't know. I should have known. Roy's jaw tightened. He looked away, his own eyes glistening. I should have known too. I should have checked on her after we lost touch. I should have... His voice broke. He wiped his face roughly with the back of his hand. I couldn't save her, but I won't let him get away with it this time. I swear to you, Warren, I will not let Tyler walk away from this. I held the journal against my chest, feeling the weight of Dorothy's words, her love, her terror. She had been trying to protect me even as she was dying. He took her from me, I said quietly. And now he's trying to take everything else. Roy nodded. But we have proof now. We have her journal, the lab results, the legal documents, the photographs of the storage. We have everything we need. Then why do I feel like I'm going to lose? Roy met my eyes. Because he's dangerous. Because he's already proven he's willing to go as far as it takes. But you're not alone anymore, Warren. We're going to stop him. I looked down at the journal again at my wife's name. Dorothy Donovan, 2022 to 2023. Her life reduced to a single year of entries. Her death a footnote in her son's plan. I thought of Tyler sleeping upstairs, calm and confident, believing he'd covered his tracks, believing I was too far gone to fight back. He was wrong. But as I sat there in the attic, holding the last words my wife had ever written, one question consumed me. Would I survive long enough to see him pay for what he'd done? I didn't know I'd fallen asleep until I jolted awake to the sound of pounding on the front door. My heart slammed against my ribs. The clock on the nightstand read 3:12 a.m. The pounding came again, hard, urgent, relentless. I stumbled out of bed and opened the bedroom door. The hallway was dark, except for a sliver of light coming from downstairs. I heard voices, Tyler's and two others I didn't recognize. I moved to the top of the stairs and looked down. Two men stood in the foyer, both wearing dark blue uniforms with badges clipped to their belts. They looked official, pressed shirts, polished shoes. But something about them felt wrong. Tyler stood between them, his hair disheveled, his face a careful mask of concern. Officers, my father's been having memory problems. I didn't realize he'd gone outside. The taller of the two men, broad-shouldered, maybe late 30s, with a shaved head, stepped forward. Mr. Donovan, I'm Officer Miller. This is Officer Brooks. We received a call about an elderly man wandering near the lake around 2 this morning. He appeared disoriented. That was your father, correct? I gripped the banister. I wasn't outside. I've been in bed all night. Miller's eyes flicked up to me, cold and assessing. Sir, we need to take you in for a psychiatric evaluation for your own safety. A what? My voice came out louder than I'd intended. I'm not going anywhere. Brooks, the second man, thinner, younger, with a narrow face, pulled a folded document from his pocket. We have the authority to transport you if there's reason to believe you're a danger to yourself. That's insane, I said, descending the stairs. I haven't left this house. Tyler moved toward me, his expression all sympathy. Dad, maybe it's best if you go with them. I stared at him. His eyes didn't match his words. They were too calm. No, I said firmly, I'm not going. Miller took a step forward. Sir, we can do this the easy way, or what? A voice cut through the room. Roy stepped out of the living room, his hair mussed, his shirt untucked. He must have been sleeping on the couch, keeping watch. He crossed the foyer and positioned himself between me and the two men. Now let me see your badges, Roy said. Miller hesitated, then unclipped his badge and held it out. Roy took it, turning it over in his hands, examining it under the light. His jaw tightened. This is fake, Roy said flatly. Miller's face hardened. Excuse me, what? This badge is a replica. The serial number format is wrong. The embossing is too shallow. I spent 30 years with the FBI. I know what a real badge looks like. Brooks's hand moved toward his belt. Roy's eyes snapped to him. Don't, Roy said quietly. You're not law enforcement. You're imposters. Whatever you're here to do, it ends now. Tyler's face went pale. Roy, what are you? Shut up, Tyler. Roy pulled out his phone and dialed. Tom, it's Roy Weber. I need you at the Donovan house on Keowee Lake. Now. We've got 2 men posing as officers. Yes, hurry. He ended the call. Miller and Brooks exchanged a glance. Then they both turned and headed for the door. Stop, Roy said. They didn't. Brooks reached for the doorknob. Roy moved faster than I would have thought possible. He grabbed Brooks by the shoulder and yanked him back, twisting his arm behind his back. Miller, Roy said calmly. If you take one more step, your partner faces charges for assaulting a federal agent. Retired or not, I still have friends. Miller froze. Sit down, Roy said. Both of you, on the floor. Miller hesitated, then slowly lowered himself to the ground. Roy released Brooks and shoved him down next to his partner. Tyler stood in the middle of the foyer, his face ashen. Roy, I don't know what. I think you hired 2 criminals to remove your father, Roy said, his voice ice. I think Sheriff Briggs is going to be very interested. Tyler opened his mouth. No words came out. Sirens wailed in the distance. Within minutes, 2 patrol cars pulled into the driveway, lights flashing red and blue. A man in his early 50s stepped out, tall, broad, with graying hair and a sheriff's star on his chest. Savre Roy, he said, shaking Roy's hand. What have we got? 2 men posing as officers, Roy said. Fake badges. They were trying to take Warren for a psychiatric evaluation. I'm guessing they were planning to drive him somewhere he wouldn't come back from. Sheriff Briggs looked at Miller and Brooks, still sitting on the floor. His expression darkened. Stand up. Hands behind your backs. A deputy stepped forward and cuffed both men. Briggs patted Miller down, pulling items from his pockets, a wallet, car keys, and a thick envelope. Briggs opened the envelope. Inside were stacks of $100 bills. He counted quickly. $5,000. He pulled out Miller's phone, scrolled through the messages, and held it up. The most recent text read, "Get the old man out of there. You'll get another $5,000 when it's done." Briggs looked at Tyler. You want to tell me what this is about? Tyler's face was white. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't send that. The message came from a burner phone, Briggs said. But we'll trace it. And if it leads back to you, you're going to have a lot of explaining to do. He turned to his deputies. Take these 2 in. Impersonating an officer attempted abduction conspiracy. The deputies led Miller and Brooks out to the patrol cars. Tyler stood frozen, his hands trembling. Briggs looked at me. Mr. Donovan, are you all right? I nodded, though my legs felt weak. Yes. Thanks to Roy. Briggs glanced at Roy. You still got it, old man. Roy managed a faint smile. Old habits. Briggs tipped his hat. I'll be in touch. We'll need statements from both of you tomorrow. He looked at Tyler one more time, his gaze hard, then walked out. The house fell silent. Tyler stood there for a long moment, then turned and walked upstairs without a word. I heard his bedroom door close. Roy and I stood alone in the foyer. They were going to take me, I said quietly. Yes. Where? Somewhere you wouldn't come back from, or somewhere they could keep you locked up indefinitely while Tyler drained your accounts. Roy's jaw tightened. He's getting desperate. I looked toward the stairs. He's not going to stop. No, Roy said. He's not. I sank into a chair, my hands shaking. I just escaped something terrible, maybe something worse than the medication, worse than the legal trap. I'd been minutes away from disappearing, and Tyler had orchestrated it all. The sun was barely up when Roy knocked on my door. I hadn't slept after the confrontation with Miller and Brooks. Every creak of the house, every distant sound from Tyler's room had kept me awake, my nerves stretched thin. Get dressed, Roy said quietly. We're meeting at my cabin. Briggs is already there. 20 minutes later, I sat in Roy's small cabin, a one-room structure tucked behind a stand of pines, about 200 yards from the main house. The space was sparse, a cot, a table, a small kitchenette, but it felt safer than anywhere else on the property. Sheriff Briggs sat across from me, his expression grim. Roy stood by the window, his phone pressed to his ear. "Diana," Roy said. "We need you here, now." He paused, listening. "Yes, it's urgent. I'll explain when you arrive." He ended the call and turned to us. "She's coming. She was already in Greenville on another case. She'll be here in an hour." I looked at Briggs. "What happens now?" "We wait," Briggs said, "and we plan." Agent Diana Foster arrived exactly 60 minutes later. I heard the sound of tires on gravel, then footsteps on the cabin's wooden porch. Roy opened the door, and a woman in her early 40s stepped inside. She was tall, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, sharp eyes, and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that came from years in federal law enforcement. She wore a navy blazer over a white shirt, a badge clipped to her belt. "Roy," she said, shaking his hand. Then she turned to me. "Mr. Donovan, I'm Special Agent Diana Foster, FBI. Roy and I worked together for 15 years. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances." I stood and shook her hand. Her grip was firm, steady. She looked at Briggs. "Sheriff, good to see you again." Agent Foster," Briggs said with a nod. Diana set a leather briefcase on the table and opened it, pulling out a notepad and a small recording device. "All right, Roy gave me a summary over the phone, but I need to hear everything from the beginning. Mr. Donovan, start with when you arrived at this house." For the next 30 minutes, I told her everything. The coffee, the dizziness, the memory gaps, Roy's discovery of the zolpidem, the legal documents in Tyler's office, the storage full of controlled substances, Dorothy's journal, the fake officers who'd tried to take me away just hours ago. Diana listened without interrupting her pen, moving rapidly across the notepad. When I finished, she set the pen down and looked at me. "This is one of the most serious cases I've encountered in a long time," she said. "We're looking at attempted harm, conspiracy, forged medical documents, illegal trade in controlled substances, and impersonating law enforcement. The FBI is opening a formal investigation as of this moment." I felt a surge of relief so strong it nearly brought tears to my eyes. "So you'll arrest Tyler? You'll arrest him now?" Diana's expression softened, but she shook her head. "Not yet." "What, I stared at her. "Why not?" "Because if we move now, his lawyers will tear our case apart," Diana said. "Right now we have circumstantial evidence. We have your testimony, Roy's testimony, the journal, the lab results, the photographs of the storage. But Tyler's defense will argue that the journal isn't admissible, that the storage belonged to the previous owner, that the fake officers were acting independently. We need to catch him in the act. We need irrefutable proof. So what am I supposed to do?" My voice came out harsher than I'd intended. "Keep living in that house, keep pretending." "Yes," Diana said firmly. "I know it's difficult, but we need Tyler to make another move. We need him on record, audio, video, doing something that can't be explained away." Roy spoke up. "You want Warren to keep playing the role of a confused old man while Tyler plans his next attempt?" "That's exactly what I want," Diana said. She looked at me. "I'm going to install surveillance equipment throughout the house. Microphones, cameras small enough that Tyler won't notice. Everything he says, everything he does will be recorded. When he tries again, and he will try again, we'll have him." I sank back into my chair, exhausted. "How long?" "A few days, maybe a week." Diana's voice was calm but unyielding. "I know this is hard, but it's the only way to make sure he doesn't walk free." Briggs leaned forward. "What about the two men we arrested this morning, Miller and Brooks?" "But we're holding them," Diana said. "They're facing federal charges. We'll pressure them to give up whoever hired them. If they cooperate, we'll have a direct link to Tyler." "And if they don't?" I asked. "Then we rely on the surveillance," Diana said. "Either way, we'll get him." She paused. then looked at Roy. "There's something else you need to know." Roy's eyes narrowed. "What?" "The FBI has been monitoring this property since December 2024, Diana said. "We've had suspicions about illegal activity here for months, specifically the trade network James Whitmore was running before he passed. We knew someone had taken over the operation, but we didn't know who until recently." I frowned. "You've been watching this house since December." "Not the house itself," Diana clarified. "We've been tracking the movement of controlled substances through the region. When your son purchased this property in January, it raised a flag. We needed to confirm he was involved before we moved." Roy's jaw tightened. "You're telling me the FBI knew about Tyler's operation for months and didn't intervene?" "We had an agent working undercover," Diana said. "He needed time to gather evidence without blowing his cover." I felt a chill run through me. "An agent where?" Diana met my eyes. "His name is Brian Cooper. He's been posing as one of Tyler's business associates." The room went silent. "Brian Cooper," I repeated slowly. "I've heard Tyler mention that name. I thought he was a lawyer or an investor." "He's neither," Diana said. "He's a federal agent. He's been embedded in Tyler's operation for the past 4 months, gathering evidence on the storage, the distribution network, the buyers. When he realized Tyler had started administering medication to you without your knowledge, he contacted me. That's when I reached out to Roy." I looked at Roy. "You knew about this not until 2 days ago," Roy said. "Diana told me there was an agent in play, but she couldn't reveal his identity until now," Diana continued. "Brian has been feeding us information, but he has to maintain his cover. If Tyler suspects him, we lose everything. That's why we couldn't intervene earlier. Brian couldn't risk exposing himself, and we needed someone on the inside who could protect you directly." That's where Roy came in. I sat back trying to process it all. An FBI agent had been watching Tyler for months, an agent who'd seen what Tyler was doing to me and had been unable to stop it without compromising the entire investigation. "So we have a team now," Roy said, his voice steady. "You, me, Brian, and Sheriff Briggs. Tyler's surrounded. He just doesn't know it yet." Diana nodded. "Exactly. And when he makes his next move, we'll be ready." Briggs stood. "I'll coordinate with my deputies. If Tyler tries anything, we'll be on site within minutes." Diana closed her briefcase. "I'll start installing the surveillance equipment this afternoon while Tyler and Lauren are out. By tonight, every room in that house will be monitored." She looked at me. "Mr. Donovan, I know this is hard, but you're not alone anymore. We're going to stop him." I nodded, though my hands were still trembling. "Thank you." After Diana and Briggs left, Roy and I sat in silence for a long moment. "You okay?" Roy asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "I thought once the FBI got involved, this would be over. But now I have to go back into that house and keep pretending. Keep waiting for Tyler to try again." "You won't be alone," Roy said. "Diana, Brian, Briggs, and me, we're all watching. If Tyler so much as looks at you wrong, we'll know." I nodded, but the fear didn't leave. I wasn't alone anymore. I had allies, people who knew the truth, people who were fighting for me. But the final battle was just beginning. The afternoon sun was warm on my face when Tyler found me sitting on the back porch. I'd spent the morning trying to appear calm, trying to act like a man whose memory was slipping, while inside I was coiled tight with fear and anticipation. "Hey, Dad!" Tyler said, his voice light. "It's a beautiful day. Why don't we take the boat out, just the two of us? We haven't done that in years." I looked up at him. His smile was easy, almost genuine. But I knew better now. "That sounds nice," I said slowly, as if considering it. "Yes. Let's do that." 20 minutes later, I stood in Roy's cabin. Roy handed me a lightweight jacket, dark blue, waterproof. "There's a GPS tracker sewn into the collar," he said quietly. And a camera the size of a shirt button hidden in the chest pocket. Diana and I will be watching everything. If anything goes wrong, we'll know immediately. I nodded, my hands trembling as I pulled the jacket on. Roy, I said, what if he won't get the chance, Roy said firmly. Briggs and I will be at the dock. Diana's monitoring the feed from here. You're not alone out there. I wanted to believe him. But the thought of being alone on a boat with Tyler after everything I'd learned, after everything he'd done, made my chest tighten. Roy gripped my shoulder. You can do this. We're right here. I met Tyler at the dock. He was standing beside a small motorboat, the kind with an outboard engine and bench seats. He smiled when he saw me. Ready, Dad. Ready? I said. I climbed in, settling onto the bench at the front. Tyler untied the mooring line and started the engine. It sputtered to life, and we pulled away from the dock, the water smooth and glassy under the afternoon sun. For a while, neither of us spoke. The boat moved steadily toward the center of the lake, the shoreline receding behind us. I watched the trees shrink, watched Roy's cabin become a distant speck. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure Tyler could hear it. Finally, Tyler cut the engine. We drifted in the silence, the boat rocking gently on the water. Dad, he said, turning to face me, I wanted to talk to you about the future, about what's best for you. I looked at him, trying to keep my expression blank. What do you mean? You need someone to take care of you, he said. His voice was calm, measured. Someone who understands what you're going through. Someone who can make sure you're safe. I'm fine, I said. You're not fine, Dad. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on mine. You're forgetting things. You're confused. You need help. I didn't respond. I just watched him waiting. Tyler reached down and adjusted something near the engine. Then he straightened and looked at me again. I'm sorry it has to be this way, he said quietly. And then the engine sputtered and died. For a moment I thought it was just a mechanical failure. But then I heard it, the faint hiss of water seeping into the boat. I looked down. Water was pooling around my feet, rising slowly but steadily. Tyler, I said, my voice sharp. The boat's leaking! We need to get back! He didn't move. Tyler. I stood, the boat rocking beneath me. We're sinking. He looked at me and his face was utterly calm. I know. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. What? I'm sorry, Dad, he said again. His voice was soft, almost gentle. This is the only way. The water was rising faster now, cold and dark, lapping at my ankles. I staggered toward him, grabbing his arm. What did you do, Tyler? What did you do? He pulled his arm free. The fuel line. I cut it before we left. The boat's going down. And you're not a strong swimmer, are you? I stared at him. My son. The boy I'd raised. The man I'd trusted. You're going to let me drown, I whispered. I don't have a choice, he said. You were going to ruin everything. You and that gardener digging through my things, asking questions. I can't let you take this from me. The water was at my knees now. The boat was tilting, listing to one side. I grabbed the edge of the seat, trying to steady myself, but the jacket Roy had given me felt heavy, dragging me down. Help me, I said, my voice breaking. Tyler, please. He didn't answer. He just stood there watching me with those cold, empty eyes. The boat lurched. I lost my balance and fell backward into the water. The cold was a shock, stealing my breath. I thrashed, trying to stay afloat, but the jacket was pulling me down, the GPS and camera weighing me like stones. Water filled my mouth, my nose. I kicked, clawed at the surface, but I was sinking. This is it, I thought. This is how it ends. And then I felt a hand close around my collar. Someone yanked me upward hard. My head broke the surface, and I gasped, choking on air and water. A strong arm wrapped around my chest, holding me up. Stop fighting, a voice said in my ear, Roy's voice. "I've got you." I went limp, letting him pull me through the water. I couldn't see where we were going. I could barely see anything through the water streaming down my face, but I felt Roy's steady strokes, felt the solid strength of his grip. It felt like hours, but it must have been only minutes. Then my feet scraped against something solid, sand rocks, and hands were lifting me, dragging me onto the shore. I collapsed onto the grass, coughing up water, my whole body shaking. Someone draped a blanket over my shoulders. I looked up and saw Sheriff Briggs kneeling beside me. "You're all right," Briggs said. "You're safe." I turned my head. Tyler was standing a few yards away, soaking wet, his face pale. 2 deputies flanked him. Briggs stood and walked over to Tyler. "Tyler Donovan," he said, his voice hard. "You are a primary suspect in an attempted harm case. You are not under arrest at this time, but you are prohibited from leaving the county. Do you understand?" Tyler's eyes were wide, frantic. "This is insane. The boat malfunctioned. I didn't know it was going to sink. I was trying to help him." "Save it," Briggs said. "We have everything on camera. Everything you said, everything you did. You're done." Tyler looked at me then, and for a moment, our eyes met. There was no remorse there, no guilt, just anger, just the cold, hollow stare of someone who'd been caught. I looked away. Roy crouched beside me, water streaming from his clothes, his breathing labored. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, though I wasn't sure it was true. "You saved my life." "That's what friends do," Roy said quietly. Diana appeared, her phone in her hand. "We got everything," she said. "Audio, video, GPS tracking. The footage is clear." He admitted it. He said he cut the fuel line. He said he was letting you sink. I closed my eyes, the weight of it all crashing over me. My son had just tried to end my life. Not with medication slipped into coffee, not with fake documents or hired thugs. He'd looked me in the eye and told me he was going to let me drown, and he'd felt nothing. Tyler came home just after dark. I heard the sound of his car in the driveway, the slam of the door, the heavy tread of his footsteps on the porch. I was sitting in the living room, wrapped in a blanket Roy had given me, still shivering from the lake. The front door opened. Tyler stepped inside, his clothes still damp, his face pale and drawn. And behind him in the doorway stood Lauren. She didn't look at Tyler. She looked at me, and her eyes were full of hate. "What did you do to him?" she said, her voice sharp. I blinked, trying to look confused. "What?" You heard me." She stepped into the room, her arms crossed over her chest. "The police said Tyler was involved in some kind of incident on the lake. That you nearly—" She stopped herself, her jaw tightening. "What did you tell them?" "I didn't tell them anything," I said quietly. "I just nearly got ended by my own son." Lauren's expression didn't change. If anything, her eyes grew colder. "You think anyone's going to believe that?" she said. "You think anyone's going to believe the word of a confused old man who can't even remember what day it is?" I looked down at my hands, letting my shoulders slump. "I just want to be left alone." "Left alone." Lauren laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You've been making trouble since the day you got here. Wandering around asking questions, going through things that aren't your business. I haven't— Oh, don't lie to me." She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. "You've been snooping. You and that gardener. Tyler told me. You've been looking through his office, going through his files. What are you trying to do, ruin us?" I didn't answer. I just stared at her, keeping my expression blank. Lauren moved closer still, until she was standing right in front of me. I could smell her perfume, sharp floral, too sweet. "Listen to me," she said, her voice ice. "You don't need that $850,000. You don't need the property in Virginia. You're not going to live long enough to enjoy it anyway. Why not just hand it over to us now, sign the papers? Make this easy." I looked up at her. "Because it's mine. It's not yours anymore," she said. You're not capable of managing it. You're not capable of managing anything. You're sick, Dad. The word dripped with mockery. You need someone to take care of you. Someone who knows what's best. And that's you, I said quietly. That's us, she corrected. Tyler and me. We've been taking care of you this whole time. We brought you here. We've been feeding you, making sure you're safe. And this is how you repay us. By accusing Tyler of trying to hurt you. He did try, I said, Lauren's face twisted. You don't know what you're talking about. You're confused. You're imagining things. That's what happens when people get old. They lose their grip on reality. I felt a flicker of anger, hot and sharp, but I forced it down. I couldn't break character. Not now. I just want peace. I said, my voice weak, trembling. Then give us what we want, Lauren said. Sign over the property, sign the guardianship papers, let us handle everything, and then you can have all the peace you want. I didn't respond. Lauren leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You think you're clever, don't you? You think you can outsmart us. But you're wrong. You're just a lonely old man with no one to protect you. No one cares about you. Your wife is gone. Your friends are gone. You're all alone. And when this is over, you're going to lose everything. Her words hung in the air, cold and sharp. I looked at her, really looked at her. At the woman my son had married. At the woman who'd smiled at me when I'd arrived, who'd poured me coffee and asked how I was feeling. And I saw nothing behind her eyes. No warmth, no compassion, just greed and contempt. You're wrong, I said quietly. She straightened, her expression hardening. What? I'm not alone, I said. And I'm not confused. For a moment something flickered across her face, doubt maybe, or fear. But then Tyler's voice cut through the room. Lauren. He was standing in the doorway, his face tight. Stop. Don't say anything else. Lauren turned to him, her expression shifting to frustration. He needs to understand. I said, stop. Tyler's voice was sharp, almost panicked. He crossed the room and grabbed her arm. We're leaving, now. Tyler, what? Now, Lauren. He pulled her toward the door. She resisted for a moment, glaring at me over her shoulder, but Tyler's grip was firm. A moment later, they were gone, the door slamming behind them. I sat in the silence, my heart pounding. The blanket had slipped from my shoulders. My hands were shaking again, but not from the cold. Footsteps sounded behind me. I turned to see Roy stepping out from the hallway. He must have been listening from his room or maybe from the kitchen. He held a small tablet in his hand, the screen glowing faintly. Did you get it? I asked. Roy nodded. Every word. Diana was listening too. It's all recorded. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. She didn't confess to the poisoning. No, Roy said. But she confessed to the motive. She admitted she wants your money. She admitted she thinks you're not capable of managing your own affairs. She threatened you. She told you that you're going to lose everything. He looked at me, his expression grim. That's enough. Combined with Tyler's actions on the boat, the fake police, the legal documents, the storage, it's enough. I leaned back in the chair, exhausted. What happens now? Diana's forwarding the recording to the district attorney's office. Briggs is preparing an arrest warrant. By tomorrow morning, they'll both be in custody. And Brian? I asked. The undercover agent. When does he come in? Soon, Roy said. He's been coordinating with Diana. Once Tyler and Lauren are arrested, he'll step forward to testify about the illegal trade operation. That's when the full case comes together. I nodded, but I felt numb. It was almost over. After everything, the medication, the fake documents, the boat, the threats, it was almost over. You did well, Roy said quietly. You kept your composure. You didn't break character. That took real courage. I didn't feel courageous. I felt tired and sad and angry. She called me a lonely old man with no one to protect me. I said. She was wrong, Roy said. I looked at him. Was she? You're not alone, Roy said. And you never have been. Not since the day I recognized you. I managed a faint smile. Thank you. Roy nodded and turned to leave. But at the door he paused. I'm Warren, he said. One more thing. Lauren said you'd lose everything, but she's the one who's going to lose. She just doesn't know it yet. After he left, I sat alone in the living room, the blanket pulled tight around my shoulders. Lauren had revealed herself tonight. She'd shown her true face, the greed, the contempt, the willingness to strip me of everything I had. And she'd done it while the FBI was listening. The final battle wasn't coming. It was already here. The call came just before noon. Tyler's voice was tight, strained. I need to talk to you. Alone. Meet me at the old barn behind the property at 1 o'clock. He hung up before I could answer. I stared at the phone in my hand, my heart pounding. Roy was sitting across from me at the kitchen table. He'd heard every word. I'd put the call on speaker. It's a trap, Roy said quietly. I know. Within minutes, Diana and Sheriff Briggs arrived. We gathered in Roy's cabin, the four of us huddled around the small table. He's desperate, Diana said. He knows we're closing in. This is his last chance to... She stopped herself, but we all knew what she was going to say. To get rid of you. So, what do we do? I asked. Should we use it? Briggs said. His shoulder was bandaged from where Brooks had grazed him during the fake police incident, but his voice was steady. You go. We'll be there hidden. If Tyler tries anything, we'll have him. And if he's hired more people? I asked. Miller and Brooks are in custody, but what if he's brought in someone else? Then we deal with them, Diana said. Warren, this is the end game. If we don't act now, Tyler will find another way. We need to catch him in the act. I nodded, though my hands were shaking. At 1 o'clock, I walked across the property toward the old barn, a weathered structure about 200 yards from the main house, half hidden by overgrown trees. The door hung crooked on its hinges. Inside, the air smelled of dust and rotting wood. Tyler was standing in the center of the barn, his back to me. When he heard my footsteps, he turned. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Dad, he said quietly. Thank you for coming. I stopped a few feet away, my heart hammering. What do you want, Tyler? He took a breath. I want to say I'm sorry. I stared at him. Sorry for what? For trying to harm me on the boat. For hiring men to take me away, for everything you and Lauren have done. His jaw tightened. You don't understand. I didn't have a choice. You had a choice. I said, my voice harder than I'd intended. You chose this. No. Tyler's voice rose sharp and desperate. You don't know what it's like. The debt, the pressure, the constant fear of losing everything. I was drowning, Dad. And you had everything. The house, the money, the savings. You didn't need it. You were just sitting on it while I was... He stopped, his chest heaving. While you were what? I said quietly. While you were planning to take it from me. I was trying to survive, he shouted. And then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. Two men stepped out from the shadows at the back of the barn. Both were tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothes. One of them, a man with a shaved head and a scar running down his cheek, held something in his hand. A weapon. My blood went cold. Who are they? I whispered. Out of insurance, Tyler said flatly. The man with the scar, Jackson, I would learn later, stepped forward. Old man, he said, his voice rough. You've caused a lot of trouble. The second man, younger with a narrow face and quick eyes. Reeves moved to my other side, cutting off my escape. Shirky, I said, my voice shaking. What are you doing? Oh, what I should have done from the beginning, Tyler said. His voice was cold, now empty. You forced me into this, Dad. You wouldn't sign the papers. You wouldn't cooperate. You kept digging, kept asking questions. And now it's too late. Reeves raised his weapon, pointing it at me. Tyler, please. And then everything happened at once. Roy came out of nowhere, a blur of motion from the side of the barn. He slammed into Jackson, knocking him sideways. The weapon went off, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. The shot went wide, splintering wood. Down! Roy shouted. I dropped to the ground, my ears ringing. The barn door exploded inward. Sheriff Briggs and 4 deputies stormed in their own weapons drawn. Please drop your weapons. Reeves spun toward them and fired. I saw Briggs stagger, his hand going to his shoulder. One of the deputies returned fire. Reeves screamed and went down, clutching his leg. Jackson scrambled to his feet, trying to run toward the back exit. But Diana was already there, stepping out from behind a stack of crates. She moved fast, professional, slamming him against the wall and twisting his arm behind his back. You're done, she said. Tyler bolted. He ran toward the side door, heading for the tree line that led to the lake. Briggs' blood seeping through his shirt took off after him. Briggs, you're hurt! I shouted, but he didn't stop. I staggered to my feet, my legs weak, and followed. By the time I reached the edge of the trees, Briggs had caught up to Tyler. Despite the injury to his shoulder, Briggs tackled him, bringing him down hard onto the grass. Tyler struggled, but Briggs was stronger. He flipped Tyler onto his stomach and cuffed his hands behind his back. Tyler Donovan, Briggs said, breathing hard. You're under arrest for conspiracy, attempted harm, and about 10 other charges I'm going to enjoy listing. Tyler didn't respond. He just lay there, his face pressed into the dirt, his body shaking. I stood a few feet away, staring down at my son. Diana's voice crackled over Briggs's radio. We've got Lauren. She was trying to leave through the back of the main house. She's in custody. Briggs nodded and looked up at me. It's over, Warren. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Back at the barn, Roy was standing over Jackson and Reeves, both of whom were now cuffed and surrounded by deputies. Reeves was being treated for the shot to his leg. Jackson was sullen, silent. Diana walked over to me, her expression grim. We ran their prints. Jackson and Reeves have records, hired muscle-known associates of Tyler's business contacts. He must have called them in after Miller and Brooks were arrested. Where's Lauren? I asked. In a patrol car, Diana said. She's not talking, but she doesn't need to. We have everything we need. I looked at Tyler, who was being led toward another patrol car by 2 deputies. His head was down, his shoulders slumped. For a moment our eyes met. There was no apology there, no remorse, just emptiness. And then he was gone, disappearing into the back of the car. I stood in the middle of the barn, my whole body trembling. Roy put a hand on my shoulder. You did it, he said quietly. You survived. I nodded, but I felt hollow. Tyler and Lauren were in custody. Jackson and Reeves were arrested. The threat was over, but as I stood there surrounded by deputies and FBI agents and the wreckage of my son's last desperate act, I realized something. This wasn't the end of the truth. It was only the beginning. The days after Tyler and Lauren's arrest passed in a blur. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tyler's face, cold, empty, devoid of remorse. On the morning of June 12th, Diana called. We need you at the station. Miller's talking. I sat in an observation room at the county sheriff's office, watching through a one-way mirror as Miller hunched over a metal table. His lawyer sat beside him. Across from them, Diana and another FBI agent leaned forward. Miller looked older than when Roy had stopped him at the house. His face was drawn, his eyes red-rimmed. I'm facing serious charges. Miller said, his voice hoarse. Attempted abduction, conspiracy, impersonating an officer. My lawyer says I'm looking at 20 years. But if you cooperate, we'll recommend a reduced sentence, Diana said. But you need to give us everything. Miller nodded. He pulled his phone from the evidence bag. Tyler Donovan hired me. $50,000. He paid half up front, $25,000 in cash. I still have the messages, and I recorded the transaction, video, just in case he tried to stiff me. Diana took the phone and scrolled. Play the video. The monitor flickered to life. I watched as Tyler handed Miller a thick envelope. The timestamp read June 9th, 11:47 p.m. Tyler's face was clear and unmistakable. "That's him," Miller said. "He told me to make it look like the old man was a danger to himself. Said if we could get him committed, he'd pay the rest. If we couldn't, he said to make sure the old man didn't come back." My chest tightened. Hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way I hadn't been prepared for. After the interrogation, Diana led me to a conference room. Roy was there along with Sheriff Briggs, his arm in a sling. And at the far end sat a man I'd heard about but never met. "Ms. Warren," Diana said, "this is Special Agent Brian Cooper." Brian stood and extended his hand. He was in his early 40s with short brown hair, sharp blue eyes, and a lean build. He wore a dark suit. "Mr. Donovan," he said calmly, "I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. You're the undercover agent," I said. "I was," Brian corrected. "For 4 months, I've been embedded in Tyler's operation posing as a business associate. My job was to gather evidence on the illegal trade network he'd taken over from James Whitmore. But when I realized what Tyler was doing to you, when I saw him administering medication without your knowledge, I contacted Diana. That's when we brought Roy in." Roy nodded. "Brian's been feeding us intel the whole time. He's the reason we knew about the storage, the financial documents, the hired men." Brian pulled a small recording device from his briefcase. "There's something else. 2 days ago before the arrest, I recorded a conversation between Tyler and Lauren. They didn't know I was listening. I'd planted a microphone in Tyler's car." He pressed play. Tyler's voice crackled through the speaker. "We need to move faster. The old man's getting suspicious. Roy's been watching him. If we don't deal with this soon, everything falls apart." Lauren's voice followed cold and clipped. "Then we do what we should have done from the start. Get rid of him, permanently, just like we did with your mother." There was a pause. Then Tyler. "That was different. She was threatening to cut me off. She was going to expose everything. We didn't have a choice. And we don't have a choice now," Lauren said. "He's in the way. Handle it." The recording ended. I sat frozen. "They're admitting it. They're admitting they—" I couldn't finish. Diana leaned forward. "Warren, I've been reviewing your wife's death certificate. Dorothy passed in March 2023. The official cause was listed as accidental, a fall down the stairs. There was no autopsy. But it wasn't," I said, my voice breaking. "No," Diana said gently. "Based on Dorothy's journal, Miller's confession, and this recording, I believe Dorothy was given Zolpidem just like you. It made her disoriented, dizzy, and then she fell, or she was pushed." I closed my eyes, seeing Dorothy's face. The way she'd smiled at me the morning before that business trip. The way she'd said, "I love you," before I'd walked out the door. "Can we prove it?" I asked. Diana hesitated. "There's one way. We petition the court for an exhumation. We test Dorothy's remains, specifically her bone marrow. Zolpidem can be detected in bone tissue even years after ingestion, especially if the dose was high." I looked at her. "You want to—" "I know it's difficult," Diana said, "but it's the only way to prove what Tyler did." I thought of Dorothy resting in the cemetery on the hill. I thought of disturbing her peace. But I also thought of justice. "Do it," I said. On June 12th, Diana filed an emergency petition with the county court. On June 15th, the judge approved it. On June 18th, a forensic team arrived at the cemetery. I stood at a distance watching as they carefully opened Dorothy's grave. Roy stood beside me, silent. For the next week, I waited. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. On June 25th, Diana called. "We have the results." I sat across from Diana in her office. She slid a folder across the desk. The forensic pathologist found high concentrations of zolpidem in Dorothy's bone marrow, she said. Levels consistent with a massive overdose far beyond what would be prescribed medically. Combined with the bruising pattern on her body, the pathologist believes she was disoriented from the medication and then fell or was pushed down the stairs. I stared at the report, the words blurring. Tyler did this, I said. Yes, Diana said quietly. Tyler was responsible for his mother's death. I looked up at her, tears streaming down my face. He didn't just try to harm me. He ended his own mother's life. Diana nodded. And now we can prove it. That night I sat alone in Roy's cabin, the lights off, darkness pressing in around me. My son had done the unthinkable. He'd taken the woman I loved, the woman who'd raised him, who'd sacrificed for him, and he'd ended her life for money. I thought of Dorothy's journal, her final entry. Warren, if you're reading this, please know I love you. Please don't let him get away with this. I wouldn't. Tyler was in custody. The evidence was overwhelming. The trial would come soon, and I would make sure he paid for every moment of suffering he'd caused. Every lie, every betrayal, every life he'd destroyed. I would see him brought to justice. Not just for me, for Dorothy. The air inside the courtroom was thick, pressing down on my chest. It was July 15th, 2025, and I, Warren Donovan, sat 5 meters from the defense table, where my son Tyler sat in a dark blue suit, his face blank as stone. Beside him, Lauren stared at the table. Neither looked at me. I couldn't look at them for more than a few seconds either. The judge rapped his gavel and announced the opening of the trial. Prosecutor Sarah Caldwell rose and outlined the charges: conspiracy to harm Warren Donovan, conspiracy related to Dorothy Donovan's death, trafficking in controlled substances, and attempted harm. Every word felt like a stone dropping into my stomach. The first week, July 15th to 19th, was the longest stretch of days in my life. Ms. Caldwell played the video Tyler had recorded of me drinking coffee, pretending to be confused. I watched myself on the screen, tired, foggy-eyed, and felt ashamed, even knowing it was an act. Next came the audio, Lauren's voice saying, "The old man is near death. You need to get the assets before it's too late." Then Tyler's voice, low and cold. "In 2 or 3 days, he'll be completely incapacitated." Ms. Caldwell opened Dorothy's diary and read the entries aloud. January 15th, 2023. Tyler demanded I loan him $50,000. When I refused, he slammed the table and said I didn't deserve to be his mother. January 28th, 2023. Tyler talked about inheritance. His eyes were cold as ice. I no longer recognize my son. February 10th, 2023. Today, Tyler came when Warren was away. I feel unsafe in my own house. March 3rd, 2023. After drinking tea, I felt dizzy. My head spun, my legs gave out. I fell on the stairs. If anything happens to me, investigate Tyler. My voice trembled as I heard my wife's final written words. I wanted to scream, but I just sat still, tears running silently down my face. The forensic expert presented his report. Mrs. Dorothy Donovan's bone marrow showed extremely high levels of zolpidem, 10 times the safe dose. At that concentration, she would have lost consciousness and fallen. This was not an accident. This was a deliberate act. At week's end, Miller and Brooks testified. Miller admitted Tyler had paid him $25,000 to get the old man out of the house and detain him in a fake psychiatric facility. Brooks confirmed. Both had plea deals and their testimony was clear. Tyler had paid them to remove me. FBI agent Brian Cooper testified next. He described 4 months working undercover alongside Tyler and played a recording of Tyler and Lauren discussing getting rid of the old man the way he did with his mother. The courtroom went silent. My chest tightened. My son had admitted it on tape. The second week, July 22nd to 26th, brought witnesses I knew. Roy took the stand first, describing how he'd seen Lauren add white powder to my coffee, the hidden camera he'd installed in the living room clock, and the GPS tracker sewn into my jacket before the boat trip. The jury watched intently. Diana Foster followed, laying out the FBI's investigation. Tyler's $600,000 debt, the $12 million cache of synthetic opioids in the boathouse. Tyler's purchase of the property from deceased smuggler James Whitmore in December 2024, and the plan to frame me as the owner. She showed bank statements, text messages, and photographs. The evidence was overwhelming. Brian Cooper played another recording from the boathouse, Tyler's voice saying, "The old man has to disappear. We can't wait any longer. The creditors are closing in." On the fourth day, I was called to testify. I walked to the stand, legs shaking, and placed my hand on the Bible. Ms. Caldwell asked me to describe the boat trip on June 10th. I told the jury how Tyler had invited me, how the engine had cut out, how water had flooded in. I described Tyler's words, "I'm sorry, Dad. This is the only way." I told them how I'd struggled to swim, how the jacket's equipment had weighed me down, how I'd begun to sink. My voice broke when I described Roy diving in and pulling me to safety. Ms. Caldwell then asked about Dorothy's diary. I could barely speak. My wife warned me. She wrote it down because she knew, and I didn't see it. I didn't protect her. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of my own sobbing. Tyler's lawyer cross-examined me, suggesting I had staged everything to frame my son. I looked at him and said, "I wish that were true. I wish this were all a nightmare I could wake up from, but it isn't. My son took my wife's life, and he tried to take mine." The third week, July 29th to August 2nd, was agonizing. The defense argued I was a vengeful father manipulating evidence, but Miller and Brooks reaffirmed their confessions. Brian Cooper reaffirmed his recordings were authentic. The forensic expert reaffirmed the zolpidem findings. On August 1st, the jury received instructions and retired to deliberate. 4 hours later, they returned. I could barely breathe as the foreperson stood and read, "We find the defendant, Tyler Donovan, guilty on all counts. Lauren was found guilty of conspiracy to harm and theft." The courtroom erupted. Tyler's face went white. Lauren slumped in her chair. I felt no relief, only numbness. Sentencing came immediately. The judge announced, "Tyler Donovan, you are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the death of Dorothy Donovan, plus 25 years for trafficking in controlled substances. These sentences will run consecutively. You will never leave prison. Lauren Donovan, you are sentenced to 30 years in prison without the possibility of parole." Tyler turned to me, eyes blazing with hatred. He mouthed, "I hope you're happy." I stood, my voice steady despite the tears. "I'm not happy, Tyler. I've lost everything. I've lost your mother. And now I've lost you. But I will not let her death go unanswered. I will not let you destroy her memory." The bailiffs led them away. Tyler didn't look back. I walked out into the bright August sun. The heat hit my face, but I felt cold inside. I had won. Tyler was gone. Dorothy's spirit could rest. But as I stood alone on the courthouse steps, I felt no triumph, only the weight of a father who had sent his own son to prison for life, and the terrible, hollow silence of a house that would never again be a home. The road to Lake Keowee wound through pine forests, the air heavy with the scent of summer rain. It was August 28th, 2025, nearly 4 weeks since the verdict, and I, Warren Donovan, gripped the steering wheel as I drove toward the house where everything had happened. My chest tightened as the lake came into view, its surface glittering in the afternoon sun. For a moment I considered turning back, but I didn't. I had come here for a reason. The white colonial estate stood at the end of the gravel drive unchanged. The roses were in full bloom, their petals deep red and gold. The boathouse sat quietly by the water. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. According to the court's asset forfeiture order, the property now belonged to me. Tyler's crimes had been stripped away, and the house had been returned to my name. I parked and stepped out. As I reached the rose garden, I saw Roy Weber kneeling among the bushes, pruning shears in hand. He looked up, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "Welcome home, Warren," he said, standing. I stopped the words, catching in my throat. "This isn't my home anymore, Roy, but I want to turn it into something better." Roy tilted his head. "What do you have in mind?" I took a breath. "I want to turn this place into a support center for elderly people being abused by their families. A safe house where they can get legal help, medical care, counseling. I want to call it the Dorothy Donovan Foundation." Roy's eyes went red. He blinked quickly, looking away toward the lake. When he turned back, his voice was rough. "Dorothy would be so proud of you." "I hope so," I said quietly. "And Roy, I want you to be the executive director. You have the skills, the experience, the integrity. This place needs someone like you." Roy was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded, his jaw tight with emotion. "It would be my honor." We stood there in the rose garden, two old men who had been through hell together, and for the first time in months, I felt something other than grief. I felt purpose. "Come on," I said. "Let's go down to the dock." We walked side by side down the lawn to the water's edge. The dock creaked as we settled onto the wooden planks, fishing rods in hand. I baited my hook and cast the line into the water, watching the bobber drift. Roy did the same. We sat in silence, the only sounds the lapping of water and the distant call of a heron. "Roy," I said after a while, "thank you. You saved my life." Roy shook his head. "Years ago, Dorothy saved my daughter. This was just my way of repaying her." I turned to look at him. "The debt is paid then. I hope we can be friends now, not because of what we owe each other, but because we want to be." Roy smiled. "I'd like that very much." We fell silent again, and I found myself thinking about the past months. The coffee, the fake police, the sinking boat, the trial. I thought about Tyler's cold eyes as the bailiffs led him away. I thought about Dorothy's diary, her final warning. "You know, Roy," I said, my voice low. The hardest part wasn't pretending to lose my mind. It was watching my son believe I was helpless and realizing he was glad. Roy glanced at me, his expression somber. "But you turned that against him. You weren't a victim, Warren. You were a strategist. You chose to appear weak so you could trap him." I nodded slowly. "I learned that from you. When you showed me the evidence that first morning, I knew I had two choices: run or stay and fight. I chose to fight smart. I let Tyler think he was winning right up until the moment the FBI closed in." "That takes courage," Roy said. "I was terrified," I admitted. Every time I pretended to forget something, I was afraid Tyler would see through it. But I kept thinking about Dorothy. I kept thinking, she deserves justice, and I'm the only one who can make sure she gets it. Roy placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did that, Warren. You gave her justice. And now you're giving her a legacy." A tug on my line interrupted us. I jerked the rod and reeled in a decent-sized bass, its silver scales flashing. Roy laughed. "You've still got it, old man." I grinned. 63 isn't old, Roy. Not yet. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the lake in shades of amber and rose. I released the fish and watched it dart away. Then I turned my gaze to the sky and spoke softly. "Dorothy, can you see this? We're turning the pain into something good. We're building something that will help people who are scared and alone the way I was. Your name will mean hope now." Roy's voice was gentle beside me. "She sees it, Warren. I'm sure of it." We sat together as the light faded, two survivors who had become brothers. The house behind us would no longer be a place of fear. It would be a refuge. The garden where Dorothy had loved to walk would be a place of healing. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight I'd carried begin to lift. I had lost a son, but I had found a brother. I had lost my wife, but I would keep her legacy alive forever. I realized that no matter how cruel life can be, there is always room for kindness and hope. And I realized something else. If you know an elder who is afraid in their own home, don't look away. Speak up, ask questions, offer help, because silence is what predators count on. And every voice that breaks that silence can save a life. The stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. Roy and I stayed on the dock long into the night, talking about the foundation, about Dorothy, about the future. And for the first time since Dorothy's death, I felt something I thought I'd never feel again. I felt peace. Looking back, I realized I missed the signs. I was so focused on grieving Dorothy that I didn't see the danger right in front of me. Tyler's coldness at the funeral, his sudden interest in my finances, the way he watched me, those weren't grief. They were calculation. My advice: don't be like me. Don't ignore your instincts. If someone in your family makes you feel unsafe, speak up. Reach out to a friend, a neighbor, anyone. Don't convince yourself that love will fix everything. Sometimes love blinds us to the truth. This family story taught me that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Tyler was my son, but he became my greatest threat. Roy was a neighbor who became a brother. This family story showed me that family isn't just who you're born to, it's who stands beside you when the world collapses. Every family story carries lessons about trust and betrayal. I also learned that even at 63, I had more strength than I knew. When Roy showed me the evidence, I could have run. Instead, I chose to fight. I pretended to be weak so I could trap Tyler. That choice saved my life. There's a verse I keep coming back to. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? God didn't take away the darkness, but He gave me courage to walk through it. He sent Roy when I needed help most. These grandpa stories aren't just about survival. They're about holding on to hope when everything falls apart. If you're an elder facing abuse, don't stay silent. There are grandpa stories like mine that end in justice, not tragedy. But only if someone speaks up. That's why grandpa stories matter. They warn others. Dorothy's memory lives on in the foundation we built. That's how love defeats evil, by transforming pain into protection for others. Thank you for journeying with me to the end. What would you do in Warren's situation? Share your thoughts below. I truly want to hear your perspective. If this moved you, subscribe for more stories. Note: while inspired by real elder abuse issues, some elements were dramatized for storytelling. Explore other content if this isn't your preference.